Hello, it's Garnet here, and I'd like to talk to you about something that is perhaps on a little bit of a deeper level, which is why it's in the Deeper Neurolight Learning playlist. The subject is called More is Not More. More is not more. And in this subject, I want to introduce a few technical terms. Some of you may know them well. I've mentioned some of them in the past, or they might be new. One of the key words, the terms, one of the key principles is called hormesis. And hormesis is a profound principle in complementary healthcare and certainly in wellness. And it spans out into all of nature, but here I'll refer to it within the concepts of biology and wellness. Now, whenever we talk about hormesis, we also have to talk about stress. And stress is a kind of a dirty word these days. But, frankly, Hans Selye last century was really the researcher, the bright mind that helped us understand in depth this principle of stress. And he didn't use the word stress negatively. He coined a term distress as to when stress became negative. But we as a culture in our vocabulary have kind of dropped the distress and pushed that meaning into the simple term stress. So stress is simply when you apply a stimulation to something. I could take a piece of metal and try to bend it, and that would be applying stress. So stress is a stimulation or an applied force. And the fact is that stress is good. Stress is what it takes to experience growth, even growth of muscle. Stress is what is necessary to experience new learning. There's a sense of need to adapt because of the message from the stress. So why am I talking about more is not more, hormesis, stress, in a Neurolight Learning video? Well, they all tie together perfectly. So, the kind of the most popular term and concept over the past few decades, and it's resurrecting now because of more technologies being available. We can do more, the cost is less, and then there's the internet and social media, and it's all bubbling up, this business of brain entrainment. And brain entrainment is an aspect of the behavior and characteristic of the brain. I think what is superseding it dramatically these days is the excited understanding and appreciation of neuroplasticity. So there's an awful lot going on with understanding the brain, the way the brain works, and consequently how to communicate with the brain. So, in a sense, if you could accept that the word stress is not directly negative, that distress could be negative, but stress is actually right now, I'm creating stress for you because of my attempt to communicate. It's a stimulation, and it's a stimulation that at a certain level, at a certain threshold, is provocative. The system experiencing the stress will want to respond. This is completely hooked into one of my favorite drums to beat: neuroplastic capacity, neuroplastic demand. So if this is the capacity, if this is the level of ability to respond, and this is the demand, Hormesis talks about this relationship. Stress is one of the ways to think about this relationship, so that when the demand meets capacity, when it's equal, that's the point at which just toying with the demand to tickle, to kind of knock at the door of that threshold, that's when the stimulation can become a stressor. That's when the stimulation becomes provocative, because just nudging up to that threshold and peaking beyond that threshold but not jumping past it, that's where we find the principle of hormesis. Hormesis is when low threshold doses of a stimulation create enough of a stress reaction, enough of a response. That's why attention is necessary in neuroplastic change, because attention is that signaling of, hey, something going on here. And this is the area where the brain is coaxed into neuroplastic change. It's the area, this amazing thing, this tipping point of adaptive response. And the thing about hormesis is, if the stimulation, if the signal, if the light and sound, in our case, is insufficient, it's too low, then what happens is nothing much. And you can imagine that there's this curve that rises higher and higher, and when that curve of demand matches capacity and then starts to tickle, slightly challenge, wants to dance with that capacity, then at that point there's a triggering that happens. And that triggering is right in the realm of neuroplastic change. It's right in the realm of when adaptive change happens in a complex system. Also, understand that if that stressor continues, it changes from being a communication or an encouragement for change, and it becomes a distress. It actually moves into a negative or toxic response. What starts off as being the invitation into a positive growth turns into a maladaptation of protection and reaction, where the action actually becomes toxic to the system. So knowing how to match capacity and demand, this is the whole beautiful thing in hormesis, 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 like hormone. It comes from the Greek, meaning to excite change. So hormesis is the art and science of knowing when enough is enough, that more is not more, that longer is not better, that brighter is not better, that increasing the intensity beyond what's called, and I've mentioned this before, Aday's principle. Aday was a researcher who was working in biochemistry and calcium uptake and so on, and he recognized that there is this optimum biological window when systems, sensitive systems, are able to make the most out of information stimulation. So, in the world of neuroplasticity, and in the world of sensory stimulation, and in our smaller world of the neurolite, this is really critical. This is why I say that the neurolite works with brain engagement and not simply brain entrainment. Entrainment is a smaller part, a much smaller part of the compositional theory in the neurolite. And it's used. I'm often, does brain entrainment work? Yes. Does it work as well as we would like? No. And really, what does it provide? It only provides a very narrow induced state that is weak on retention and learning. And there's a lot to be said about the value of brain entrainment, but brain engagement, in my view, is certainly the evolution forward, where we're working here to introduce incremental degrees of stress. Yeah, stress. But not stress the bad stress, stress the good stress, stress that is the low level tipping point of stimulation that provokes and produces positive change, creating that vector, moving along with it. So even when when you look at the neurolite, you see that I have these suggested limits. I mean, you could turn it off at any point, but these limits, these 11-minute periods that are suggested because of hormesis, the dose and dosage, if you want to talk in chemical pharmaceutical terms, right? These things all have biological principles. And I would invite you to think that more is not more. We know that from general exercise. The idea before is that the more you lifted weights, the stronger you could get. And the realization was that no, there was this, from economics, this point of diminishing returns, where the more you did, the less that you got. It's also something well known in monetary terms, right? Don't throw away good money after bad money, they would say. So think about the fact that more is not more, that enough is enough, and that the neuroplastic capacity, the brain vitality, the degree of brain fitness, the fortitude, is a reality. Just like the fortitude of my bicep is a reality. What I can lift and I can't lift, or how it can grow, is a biological reality. It's designed by nature. So, hormesis, stress, more is not more. Think in terms of the frequency of application, meaning how many times you do a session. Look at how long you do the session. Look at the light intensity and even sound intensity of the compositions, and recognize that you want to help the brain build and maintain capacity, fitness, and then you want to help the brain move through troubled times, and you also want to help shape the brain over long periods of time. You can't lie to neuroplasticity and being sensitive to more is not more. Look it up. Think deeply about hormesis, the tipping point, where the point is to enable the brain to do what it does on its own. We don't want to command or overtake the brain. I could go on and on and on, and maybe I will at other points. But anyway, more is not more. Think about hormesis, look it up, read about it if you like. Rethink stress and distress. Hans Selye, S-E-Y-L-E, brilliant Hungarian, who adapted the whole principle of the attempt of a system to deal with stressful stimulation that can be distressful, and how it adapts to it. Now, thanks very much. It's just great stuff. You'll see and understand so many things about life in general. Here, let's look at the neurolite. Thanks.